decided to talk about family wellness for the simple reason, like I said, people have been contacting me and saying, what are we going to do to support our kids? And we thought that this would be a great opportunity to talk about how do we support our wellness, not only within our kids, but young adults as well. The roundtable is really about opening dialogue and allowing people to really kind of talk with experts in the field. And we want to be intentional about our emotional and psychological well-being. The roundtable is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health care professional. And we really kind of look forward to supporting you, like I said, to allow you to kind of get to know more about the topic, or at least start to know more about this topic in general. It's not going to be an exhaustive list of information tonight. I want to introduce you to our panelists, and I'd like to give you a little bit of information about them. First, I want to kind of tell you a little bit about Marlene Spence. Marlene, welcome.
Hi,
She's
thank
a
you.
child behavioral specialist, a parent coach, founder of Cornerstone Family Services, and the creator of Reward Them, the first restickable routine chart for families. And she's recently was featured on CTV and Cityline. And in the past 21 years, she's used her extensive knowledge of applied behavioral analysis to inspire and impact the lives, attitudes, behaviors of students and educators in over 200 classrooms, and has created happy, OMG, proud parent moments with over 500 families. She's committed to providing programs and services and products that empower parents to raise responsible, independent, and confident, happy children, despite the challenges and despite the diagnosis that we all are aware of. Marlene Spence is a wife and a mother of two beautiful, energetic kids. Thank you very much for coming here and being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Carole.
Gill, welcome.
Thank you.
Lori is the founder and clinical director at the Attachment and Trauma Treatment Center for Healing, and she's a registered psychotherapist, a certified trauma specialist, and trainer, consultant, and a supervisor for the National Institute for Trauma and Loss in Children. And she's also a former psychology professor with 18 years of experience working with children, youth, and adults in various professional settings. Her diverse background has provided her with a wealth of skills in the areas of trauma, attachment, mental health, compassion fatigue prevention, addiction, eating disorders, wellness, and education. So Lori combines her professional experience with her love for learning, and that's resulted in her doing a lot of training with a rich addition to research and evidence-based, and her best practice treatment models and techniques to bring you leading edge, practical, and inclusive training. Lori is honored to have received also an award in 2014, where she's contributed in trauma in the field of trauma. And she's also engaged in looking, she's an engaged, sought after presenter. And she's going to provide us a lot of information in terms of trauma-informed work and the work that she's done. So we look forward to hearing more about that, and we thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So when I thought about this evening, I thought to myself, I'm like, I think even now we're hearing a lot more about self-regulation. It's, you know, it's out there, people are talking about it, and I always hear people saying to myself, to me, like, okay, so self-regulation, just behaving better, right? Is that it, or is it just that simple? And you know, tonight I just want you to kind of, for both of you, if you can just share with me, what is your sort of understanding of self-regulation, and why is this an important topic that you think that we should be chatting about, especially now during COVID? So either one of you, what are your thoughts around self-regulation and why that's important to our families and to our children in general? Any thoughts on that?
Yes. Okay, so yeah, it's funny that you say that, because a lot of people do think that self-regulation is just this willpower, right? And like, why can't you regulate your emotions? But it is so much more than that. When I know, or when I think about self-regulation, yes, it is being able to regulate your emotions, but it's more than just will, right? I think understanding that it also has to relate to your body's energy and your body responding to stress. And when your body is responding to a lot of stressful situations, environments, moments, it will eventually shut down. And that's what, we commonly hear, the fight, flight, and freeze. And that is our body. So that is, our brain going into survival mode. It's setting off the alarms to say, like, look, the stressors that are happening right now are too much, and they're going to do whatever they can to kind of protect themselves. And that's kind of outwardly, right? It comes out in maybe aggression, maybe yelling or shutting down. It can look differently. But I think just realizing that self-regulation is regulating, like, the energy, right? Regulating our emotional energy and our stressors, and understanding that it's more than just thinking, like, willpower, right?
I'm going to get better. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to try harder.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of our kids, I'm going to try harder. And doing that often. Lori, what are your thoughts around that, in terms of how, oftentimes people think they understand self-regulation by just trying harder? I can do this.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The window of tolerance is really the framework that we work around clinically from a treatment perspective. Is it okay if I do a screen share?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the visuals sometimes, oh, no, it's not letting me. Maybe not. Okay, well, I can.
Let me see, I can change that.
Might be in settings, so that's okay.
Okay, there you go. You should be able to.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. There we go. I'll just share for a minute, because sometimes the visual I find is really helpful. Are you seeing this okay?
Sorry?
Are you seeing?
Yeah, this is great. Yep.
Yeah, so when we're talking about self-regulation, we really work from the premise of the window of tolerance. Many leading experts in the field of trauma and attachment work have spoken about a healthy nervous system. And essentially, we're meant to have this kind of optimal arousal zone that allows us to ebb and flow throughout life. So we have things that may bring about activation, maybe too much anger, too much fear, too much apprehension, right now even uncertainty, but then we tend to settle. We may come close to the edges of, having too little energy. Think about when we have loss, right? Or we're really tired and not able to sleep. It impacts our nervous system as well. But typically what happens is, with a healthy nervous system, we can kind of ebb and flow through these different life experiences and re-regulate. With trauma, with extreme stress, with adverse childhood experiences, what we see is this drastically disrupts that window, and it can leave us in a place where we're stuck on or stuck on off. So even for parents of children, that have a healthy nervous system, but they have these overwhelming events that happen, it can really throw that nervous system out of balance. And what we can see is people become stuck on, and think about that as too much. So there's excess energy, too much fear, pain, terror, but it might even be excitement. If you've ever seen a child, kind of destabilize when maybe they're preparing for a birthday party, and you're like, what's happening here? Sometimes our bodies just feel too full, right? So that would be more of that hyper-aroused response. Similarly, we can see people become stuck on off, where they're really in that shut down, very lethargic, almost exhausted state. And what we may see is, through trauma, we often see an oscillating between the two. From the perspective of parenting, though, this may look like, a massive outburst, right? Lots of yelling, getting really upset, and then they're tired and going to sleep because they've discharged that excess energy. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about today is helping people to understand how to notice, where people are, whether they're stuck on or stuck on off, and strategies that we can effectively use to re-regulate.
Right.
Often we'll see people, with with without having the awareness of where they are or what's being impacted, they'll try to re-regulate. So those big outbursts, it may be self-harming behaviors, right? Even little kids banging their heads. It may be addictions, but what we see is often people are trying to release the excess energy when they're stuck on, or trying to upregulate, when they're stuck on off, and they just don't know how to get back here to that normative range by themselves.
So they're trying to manage that, right? As we were saying earlier, it's like kids are trying to manage that, and they're young, their brains are forming and they're watching us. So it's a lot going on.
And not just kids, right? This applies to our adults as well. So we work with a lot of adults that have had these adverse experiences, and or they haven't had those healthy foundations to develop their nervous system in an optimal way to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So they need those tools, knowledge, resources to help them learn how to regulate.
And so I'm going to ask you both, as adults, what gets in the way of us being able to regulate ourselves? Because it's true. We are helping our kids to regulate, but then we're not regulated. We see this all the time with families and individuals, and we're trying, we even get into that. We're trying to regulate. What happens there? What are you said earlier, Lori, some adverse situations come into play. What else is kind of in the room? What are some things that we need to be mindful of? Thoughts?
Well, I'll just speak to it from a neuro perspective, if that's helpful. So when we look even at the brain, Dan Siegel has a great model, a hand-brain model, right? And he talks about how the brain develops from the bottom up and the inside out. At the base here, we would have like our brain stem, which is involved in our autonomic function, so breathing, our heart beating, but also fight, flight, freeze responses. Then we have the midbrain, which is more so our emotional brain. So limbic system is there, which is our emotional regulatory system. The amygdala is there. That's our personal threat detector. And then we also have the hippocampus and many other, but these are the main networks that I focus on. And the hippocampus is like our personal Google for the brain. It links in with emotional memory and learning. The last part of the brain to more fully grow and develop is this prefrontal part. And the prefrontal part is involved with logic, reason, rationalization, cause and effect, all of the strategies and learning. And what happens is when emotions become too big down here in the brainstem and in the midbrain, it causes us to flip our lid, right? When we flip our lid, we lose access to logic, reason, rationalization, cause and effect. So this is part of why talking to somebody when they're in this state of overwhelm isn't going to impact, because that thinking part of their brain and even our speech centers are offline, right? So sometimes kids and adults don't even have any words because their speech centers are literally offline because they're so overwhelmed down here in the midbrain. So a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to regulate from a bottom-up perspective. So regulating the body, the nervous system. When we do that, it helps to calm that higher order part of the brain, which then allows us to have the logic, reason, rationalization, strategies, all of that really good stuff.
Right. And so, Marlene, what are you seeing now with COVID and all of that playing a role? What are you starting to see with a lot of our families? What are they struggling with?
Yeah, I think the awareness, I think the parents that I've kind of been working with, I think they don't understand how stressed I think their kids really are. And so I think they're just not aware of the toll that it could be taking on them, because again, a lot of our kids may not show it overtly. So they may not be, the child who is, telling them off and, being aggressive, right? It might be that child who is playing quietly in their room. It could be the child who's quietly just sitting watch TV and they think like, oh, they're fine,
right?
But not really realizing, right, that they've shut down, and they need something to upreg or help them upreg. So I think that awareness too, I think even for parents, just to know what their triggers are, taking a minute to stop and think, what is it that's really bothering me? Have I slept? Have my kids slept? What are their sleeping patterns? Have I eaten? Those basic things. But sometimes, again, it can even be not even aware that, it's noisy. It really, I get frustrated when it's noisy, when it's loud. when I have to sit, in an uncomfortable chair for a long time, long drives, like all those things are different triggers for different individuals. And I think too, as parents, things that don't bother us, we think they don't bother our kids. And so we think like, okay, like, it's loud. Like, I love it. Like, this is great. Not realizing like our kids have totally shut down, and they are going to, act out or do whatever they can to escape the situation, because, they cannot regulate themselves in that environment, or it's harder to.
And Lori, what are you seeing as well in terms of, so I'm hearing Marlene say it's like parents are not really even recognizing that their kids are in shutdown, that they're not present. What are you experiencing now as you're kind of connecting with parents, families during COVID?
Yeah, I just think there's so much, right? There's so much, there's uncertainty, there's overwhelm. This is new, it's novel, so the brain doesn't quite know what to do with it. We have people that, are isolated, that, are quite overwhelmed and lonely at this time. We have people losing jobs, which contributes to stress. We have people in unhealthy kind of environments, but having to shelter in place. So I think there are so many things. From a parenting perspective, I think it's really critical to emphasize that everybody does the best that they can with what they know and what's been given to them, but our kids are attuning to us all the time. So especially in times like this, when they don't know what's going on, they're looking to us to gauge our reactions, right? How are we responding? What are we doing? How are we self-caring? And I think that, again, we do the best that we can with what we've been given and what we have available to us. But it's so critical in a time of stress that we're taking time to tend to ourselves. And I'm sure we'll speak to that more a little bit later, but also, giving kids information and helping them understand that they're safe, that, although we may not know entirely what's happening right now, we're working together as a community, as a world, to try and, help the earth heal and to help people heal from the virus. Teresa Frazier, a colleague of mine, wrote this beautiful book, and it's on our website. It's just a brief little book, and it's about, staying home and the transition from being in school and all of a sudden not, and what that means and what is a virus. And she gives these cute little visuals, and it's a great, I think that would be such a great story for parents to read to their kids, to help them understand what does all of this mean, because they don't understand it.
So we have to set the narrative for our kids, right? It's about kind of creating that dinner plate, that table of we're working together, even kind of showing them the positives of those who are out, taking care of people in the hospital. Like, how can we formulate this narrative so that they can feel comfortable in their skin, right? Or kind of be able to dial down a little bit and connect. And that is what I would say self-regulation, when we're able to feel connected to our parent or a caregiver. That's what we're aiming for, right? In terms of moving them forward. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, Carole, I love that you said we need to create the narrative, right? Because I feel as parents, if we don't do it, their friends are, media is, right? And then that's just not going to end well. And so even an example of myself, my daughter is 11, and, I've tried to be as open and honest about, what's going on, and give her, information. But I've noticed that her friends actually were on a little chat that she has, feeding information in the beginning. And she was like, did you hear that there was 2 cases of COVID in Brampton? That it's going to be close. We're going to die. And I'm looking at all these messages, and I was like, okay, and that's when I realized that's when she was starting to panic. And she would come to me and she'd be like, are we going to be okay? Are we okay?
What's really happening? Are you telling me everything?
Right? Yeah. So it is so important, as you said, because our kids are watching us, and it's important that even with the knowledge that we know, if we can break it down as simple as they need it to be, but the narrative should come from us. And as Lori said, there are great books and narratives of, even if you don't know where to start or kind of what to say. reading stories. I love reading stories and stuff like that. It's such a great conversation starter for that.
Nice.
Yeah. And if I could just add, sorry,
Yeah.
I think too, it's important for us to name for the kids how we're feeling, right? Because that's part of that attunement. So it's not, when I say, we have to be mindful of how we're expressing our feelings, it's not that we're not scared or uncertain, because that's just a human response, right? It makes sense that at times we're going to feel overwhelmed or confused or worried or even scared. These are just human emotions. And I think what kids need to know, and they pick up on that anyway. So even if we don't tell them, they already know. If you're scared, they know. But when we name it for them, we use the name it to tame it quite often, right?
Yes.
So if we can name that emotional state, it helps the brain make sense of it at that left brain logical level so they can understand. And if we add on, what does this mean for you? Much like Marlene was just sharing, it helps to fill in the blank so they're not left trying to sort it out themselves, because our imagination can just go so big, right? So big, especially when we're afraid. That amygdala kicks in and it starts focusing on the worst possible scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we want to avoid, because that's when things get, really a lot bigger than they need to be.
So I have a question. What happens when, like I was saying, like as adults, I'm not good. I'm not good. And I know, Laura, you kind of briefly touched on self-care, taking care of ourselves, right? And we hear it all the time. You got to put your mask on first before. And so I want to be good for my daughter, son. I want to be able to handle this, but I'm not really good with my emotions either. In fact, from my household, maybe we didn't talk a lot about emotions or deal with stressors really well. What are your thoughts around that? Because I hear it often when I'm with clients, and so we want to make sure that we kind of offer them something to recognize that they've made it this far, but and so you've done some good things, but now you want to be the right parent for your child. Where do you start? How do you support them? If you know yourself, the way you regulate, you need some support as well.
I'll start maybe. I think, again, for me, it comes back to that window of tolerance, right? So even as a parent or caregiver, understanding, where am I? So if I'm stuck on and I've got excess energy, so I feel anxiety, kind of my heart's pounding in my chest, right? And I just feel like my brain is really, really busy and I just can't be still, which is common with worry and fear. Then, if we have too much, think about, how do I bring that arousal down? Right. So then we're usually looking at effective ways to discharge excess energy. So exercise is great for that, right? And I know that it's challenging right now because we're not supposed to be out and about, but we can still go for mindful walks. You can still go for a brisk walk around the block. And if you have kids, engaging them in this is so, so critical for our mental health, because we need movement. We need to get out. We need to, have fresh air. We can take it in with our senses, which is also stimulatory if we're in that shutdown state. So movement is great for both. It's good for if I feel too exhausted and kind of shut down. It helps to upregulate, but it's also good if I've got excess energy and I need to discharge, right? And I think if we're in more of that shutdown state, then we're wanting to stimulate. So using our senses, sight, sound, smell, sensations of touch, right? Movement, anything that I can do to kind of move through that nervous system energy to re-regulate is really critical. I know our daughter, she's a travel athlete, right? She's go, go, go all the time. And when this all first started, there was probably 2 days that she really hung out inside. By the third day, and she's a lovely, very easy to get along with person, but by the third day, she was a little cranky. And I both looked at each other and we were like, you need to get outside. We went for a 3-hour hike and she was a totally different kid. And she said to me, Mom, I need to go outside. I need to be active. And she was sad. We had a vacation planned and we had to cancel it. There's a lot of losses and disappointments that are being experienced right now.
Right.
And regardless of whether it seems significant in the grand scheme of life, or regardless of whether it seems significant to what others are experiencing, it's significant to that person. And I think part of it is, again, that name it to tame it, allowing that to be. So, when our roles have changed, when our plans have changed, there's people who have had weddings planned or whatever it may be,
Yep.
right? Job loss, whatever it is, or just having to stay home and missing that interaction. It's all valid, it's all relevant, and it all impacts. So just noticing that and allowing for that is incredibly powerful as well.
It's interesting. I feel, if anything, if people didn't know about their emotions or how to regulate themselves or what they need, this is one time in their life they're really getting to know themselves. I actually need 3 days not going outside. That's not going to work for me. I need to be out for a moment to even just see the sun, or just, so I feel like in a way, whether you're aware of self-regulation, what that means or what's important to me, we're being kind of forced into getting to know ourselves, our bodies, in a very interesting way. And even as I kind of picture everyone, even around my neighborhood, just kind of walking outdoors and taking in, we're appreciating all those senses for the first time, I think, for a lot of people. What are your thoughts in terms of how do we kind of begin to take good care of ourselves, Marlene, and just kind of support ourselves through this as adults?
Yeah, I think, of course, again, the first step, right? Being aware that like this is a lot for me and I'm having a hard time. I can't even help my child right now because I can't even really help myself. So I think the first thing too is asking for support. And I know right now, it's going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
But I even had a conversation with a parent who, we came up with, what if, if an aunt could do a Zoom call with the kids and read a story, and play a memory game for whatever, for 1 hour, and engage them for 1 hour as go up to your room and do whatever, that's going to help you calm down, or self-regulate, or get you into a calmer frame of mind. So, and having those scheduled regularly, right? So maybe Monday it's auntie, maybe the next day it's a friend, but being able to ask for help, I think is really important. And again, being just creative on getting that support in these times. But just because we're, physically distancing, don't think that help is still not available.
Right, right. It really is. I actually, before we got onto the call, I saw, I don't know if anyone has seen this, that now people are zooming in as sitters. So this is an actual thing. And I kind of looked at it for a moment. I read the article. I was like, is this happening then? I kind of was like, yeah, if mom, dad needs to go upstairs and just take a breather, and aunt or cousin or somebody is willing to kind of hang out and talk with, the children, we're being creative now, right? And so we're using,
and now you can even apparently watch Netflix with right? So it's like, do what you need to do. Download that app and get them watching, a Netflix movie with your friend. You have an hour and a half.
Yeah, do it. Do it, right? And so it really is, wow. Sorry, Lori?
You said, or you can screen share like a storybook, right? Just like I did here with the image. You can either pull up a book. There's Zoom actually has where you can draw on the screen, so you can collaboratively draw
whiteboard. That's
on a whiteboard. So there's a lot of stuff, and it's not optimal, but we're making the best that we can of the circumstances we have.
Absolutely. Technology is, everyone's leaning on it right now, right? And it's part of what it's not going to be the replacement permanently, but it is allowing us to at least regulate, be able to sort of come up with creative parts just to support us. And I think, again, we get back into the thinking part of our brain, right? We're in a place where and that helps us to regulate once more. Like, how can we start to be in that place that we're supporting ourselves and being creative as we do that? I think that's something that, it's amazing as human beings, and that's what we're able to do. We're capable of getting through this together. And
think I think that's the key word, together, right? We're relational beings. We're born primed for connection. And, time in is one of the best gifts that we can give our children, our loved ones, when we're stressed. So, even for people who are isolated, connect with someone online, reach out and spend time with someone. If you're a parent who's like, oh my gosh, but I'm so full, I have no energy for my kids or no
Mhm.
space,
Mhm.
that's where breath work is so critical, right? Diaphragmatic breathing is the fastest way to stabilize the brainstem, which controls the fight or flight response. There's a really great or funny breath. From a yoga perspective, it's called Sakali breathing.
Mhm.
From a Kundalini yoga perspective, and from a kids' perspective, we call it taco breathing. But this is great for both. And what you would do is, breathe through your tongue like a straw. So you're breathing in through the tongue like a straw,
Mhm.
breathing out through the nose. So it's kind of funny. I'll demonstrate for you, but and it's a very regulating breath. First of all, there's a bunch of energy meridian centers on the roof of our mouth, so it's
Mhm.
directing air there. But it's just a good way to, again, get a nice deep breath into our belly,
Mhm.
and we're focusing our attention, which refocuses our mind as well away from whatever we were tuned into before.
Mhm.
And it can be a fun, playful way to teach breathing to kids. You curl your tongue like a taco. That's why it's called taco breathing. But yeah.
And I always kind of share with families and kids, we want to try these deep breathing exercises before it's too difficult to really do it in the moment, right? And Marlene, do you kind of find that with families, you're also trying to let them know, don't wait until
Yeah.
you actually need it, because then it's more difficult to kind of hold on to it. What are your thoughts
Yes.
around that?
So I often talk about the proactive strategies, right? Instead of just always acting reactively. And so even making a list, because again, right, once that red brain comes out, once like that thinking brain is gone, you
Mhm.
even forget like the deep breathing, you forget all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so for kids, I often recommend like having like a little calm down box or something where they put all the things that they kind of love or that will help them um, be able to just regulate and be calm. For parents, sometimes I say like make a list, like what are those things, right? So that in those states, you look at your list and you're like, okay, right, breathe, like,
Yes.
and again, it sounds silly, but when your thinking brain is gone, like it's gone, right, and you're not rationally thinking about like what are the steps. So being proactive and having a plan, and then taking a while. I work with so many moms who, when I say, so like, what are you going to do from your me time? Like, what do you enjoy? And they're just like, I don't know. Like right? Like they
Right.
haven't
Right.
actually, they know that they're frustrated. They know that they need some downtime,
Mhm.
or a moment to upright, but they don't know what it is that they
Looks
like to do. And so
good.
taking a moment to just even figure that out, right? So
Mhm.
that you could be proactive and regularly do it before you've come to, um, a state where you can't manage.
It's funny because it feels like we get so used to being just dysregulated. So we don't know how to take care of ourselves or how to bring those practices into play. Like, yeah, what do you like to do? Or what are something that would be helpful to kind of ground you? We said we use that word, being able to kind of feel your feet on the ground, be able to feel your bum in the chair, and just be present, right? In terms of, so what are some things now that you are kind of in that place? What are some things that will help you to kind of stay there and you enjoy those moments? And you're right. Oftentimes we have the list for our kids, Lori, but we don't have the list for ourselves. Or we think we know, we'll be able to pull to and get to it quickly because we're adults. And that's not always the case. So I just want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to ask you. Um, we touched on grief for a big bit of a moment. A lot of families are losing loved ones. Um, and I think the difficulty in having that discussion, even with our kids, but also it's a tough time because you want to be there for your children, but you might have lost someone as an adult as well too. How do you grieve and figure that out supportively to be able to, because I always say everything that we're trying to do as adults, we want to model that the best we can to our kids. What are your thoughts around that in terms of this is a real loss? This is grandma, this is grandpa, this is my dad. I want to be there for my son or daughter, but I just lost my dad, I just lost my mom. How do I make sense of that? What are your thoughts around that, given all the grief that many people are dealing with?
I'll let Lori go on.
You're going to let me go first? Okay. Yeah, you know what? We just had a guest speaker on yesterday talking about this, a friend of mine who's a grief and loss specialist. So I'll be editing her video and putting it on our website shortly. But, there are so many, as I said, losses being experienced right now. There's actual losses resulting in death, but there's, loved ones going into the hospital that, loved ones may not be able to see. There's babies being born that parents and grandparents, aren't necessarily there for. So there's a lot of layers, but I think, again, it comes back to naming it. Don't stuff your feelings. Feel your feelings, allow them to be there. I know it's really scary. I just did a session with someone today, and the inclination was to not feel those feelings because they're not pleasant, right? The sadness, the anger, the fear, whatever is there, they're not pleasant, but they are human and they are appropriate. And does it make sense that there's tremendous sadness when something like this happens? Does it make sense that there's fear or worry? Does it make sense that there's anger? When we feel our feelings, it actually allows them to lessen and shift. But when we try to stuff them away, they tend to grow bigger and almost fester, right? And it's like they will get our attention. So I often use a comprehensive resource model technique called ocean breathing. And I pair it with a DBT technique of riding the wave. And I'll teach people just that fluid breath. So breathing in fluidly to about the count of 5, breathing out fluidly to about the count of 5. And I'll often say, imagine those feelings are like rolling in and out like waves, right? And they're just feelings. It's okay. They're there. Sometimes they're really intense. Sometimes they lessen. You can use some bilateral stimulation with that if you want as well. So tapping through whatever is there. So it really just seems to help integrate that emotional felt state and consolidate memories or kind of reduce the charge associated with it. So if somebody, for example, notices a wave of intense pain coming on, they can breathe into that, tap, and it doesn't have to be up here. This is just where it's easiest to demonstrate. Your arms don't have to be crossed, but this is really awkward. So you could be tapping on your knees, you could be tapping your feet, but it's the one, then the other. So right, left, right, left. We can resource install. So we can connect with the loved one lost. We can visualize, the qualities, characteristics that we love about them and tap those in.
I like that. It's like bringing them into the room, right? I always say that, can we bring our loved one into the room for a moment?
And our brain doesn't actually differentiate between, our loved one being with us when we look at, kind of that experience of that versus us imagining or creating that. We can offer messages to that loved one. If we didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye, we can consider, what is the message that I would love to give them? If they could give me a message back, what would they want me to know? And this applies to so many things. Pregnancy loss, there's so many losses that we experience in life.
Marlene, I have a question in terms of what do we do? Because Lori said something interesting. When kids say, I don't want to feel that, or I'm afraid of that emotion coming up. And what if I hurt somebody, or what if, and they just don't want to feel that. How do we help our kids to be like, let me help you with that, or support them through that?
Yeah. So I think just as Lori said, name it and tame it. And, I was even going to just say onto that, it's funny how that is so important. I think that's even something that I've learned because culturally, I'm from the Caribbean, and they don't name it. Like there's no, right? There's no name it. Like, no, you take it and you stuff it and you bury it and you don't even look back and you just keep on moving on. And so culturally, you even see that with our children, right? So because they're like, I never see daddy cry, I never see mommy cry. I know even recently, you know, we had an aunt that passed away, and my dad and my mom were like,
Still,
and it was like, and then I was like, I'm totally emotional, right? So I'm like sobbing, whatever. But I'm just like, okay, something wrong with me or something wrong with them? Like what is it? Because again, because I didn't see it from my parents, I don't think, like, I wasn't sure if is it okay.
Right.
So I just think the modeling part, right? And I know a lot of parents shy away and they hide away when they want to cry, because they don't want their kids to see it. And I know of parents, you know, of course there's moments, yes, I think you do, but there's moments where I think it's okay. It's okay if your kids see you cry, and show that sadness, and again, you name it, and you name it for them, so that they can also do the same.
Just recognize that feelings, whatever they may be, you're able to take them into your body. You can hold those moments. You can talk about them. You don't have to be so upset and not feel or be afraid of them, really.
Right.
Sometimes I tell, you know, parents to just actually say, I had a bad day today. And it's been hard today. And just allowing those moments, because culturally the same thing. It's just that when mom or dad comes home, everyone's like, I feel there's a bad day, but no one's saying anything. I know. Right? And so allowing emotions to be okay. We can take it, we can leave it, we can, you know, feel comfortable in the feeling that we are experiencing.
Yeah. And can I just add, and not to have to fix it, because that's the other thing. So sometimes kids will see parents upset, or even loved ones, adults will see their adult loved ones upset. And there's, of course, we don't like to see our loved ones suffering, but there's a desire to fix it. And sometimes there just is no fixing. So when I'm teaching a child, you know what, I feel sad, and it's okay. Sad is part of being human, and you don't have to make it better for me, you know, because this is okay. And this is mine to take care of. There are things you can do to help, but we want to make sure that kids don't feel responsible for managing their parents' emotions, right? And back with the grief piece, that was what my colleague said yesterday, and it's so true. She said, you know, often we want to know what we can do to fix it, and we can't. The only way through it is through it. It's feeling it and moving through it in our body.
Right. And I like that, you know, the analogy is just riding the wave, that analogy, that's what feelings are, right? And that it comes and goes, and
everyone's wave is going to be different, right? I think it's important to realize that as well. Yeah.
And the feelings will be different, right? The intensity changes. So no matter how big it feels in that moment, it does lessen, it does shift.
So one more shift. So kids are struggling. They're acting out. I've had enough. I want to see my friends at school. You're not my friends. You're not my teacher, Mom. You don't even understand really what you're teaching me. Right? So what do we do when these kids are just sort of having a hard time just keeping it together? And, you know, it's different when we're in a situation where, you know, we have a routine, and you tell parents that these are the things you should do, be consistent, you know, all these things I remember kind of sharing. And with families, what do we do now, Marlene, in this situation where they're acting up, the schedule's kind of there, and how do we start? How do we support them and let them know that I'll be here with you through this?
Well, I think being empathetic is so important. Again, we acknowledge where our kids are at. They thought it was cool in the first few weeks, and now they're saying, just as you said, like, you're not my teacher. Like, I don't like this. And I think being real with them and being like, look, you know what? Like, I'm not really liking this either. I don't really like having to be, you know, your teacher. but this is kind of what, this is being frank and saying like, this is a situation. These are the things we have to do. And having them allowing them to have some input as to, look, these are their concerns. What do you think we should do? So these are the work expectations now from school. How do you think we should go about completing them? Really allowing them to speak and to feel safe doing so, so that you can hear them out, right? Allow, and sometimes it's even just like, play a game as you're playing a board game or whatever, having a conversation of, what is it really that's going on? Because as we know, behavior is communication. Behavior is saying there's some unmet need happening and they don't know how to communicate it verbally, or maybe they are yelling, maybe they are verbal, but it's maladaptive, right? It's not in a good way.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think having the conversation of like, hey, look, I noticed that in the mornings you've been waking up and you've been pretty grumpy. What's going on? Or how could we, when you wake up grumpy and you yell at me, it really, doesn't make me feel really good. Like, what's happening? What are you thinking? And just getting their input. I think a lot of times as parents, we just see the behavior and then we want to punish right away without understanding or being empathetic. Like, they're grieving their friends right now. And it's real, right? And they're going through these waves of emotions as well. And so once you're empathetic with that, I think you realize like, okay, they're shouting at me, but the shouting's not me personally.
Nice.
They're shouting at me because, they're just frustrated about something else. And so again, having them be a part of that solution, finding out like how you can work together collaboratively to problem solve and work it out.
So Lori, how do you not personalize it as a parent?
Yeah, good question. So our brain naturally is defensive and reactive, right? And so being present, being grounded, doing our own self-care really goes a long way to help me plant my own 2 feet on the ground, take a deep breath in before I respond. Right. And I think there are so many different activities and strategies, but as Marlene said, we don't want to be practicing these in the moment. We want to practice these together. It's a great way to have the time in, building in a mindfulness or a meditation practice, building in a gratitude practice through the day, building in, sifting through my feelings and experiences. When we build that in, when we're calm and regulated, it makes it so that those strategies are stored up here. And as we start to see somebody flipping that lid or the arousals becoming too high, we can introduce a strategy or a technique before they flip their lid. So it might even be, as Marlene said, naming it, right? Oh, it looks like there's some really big energy coming up in your body right now. And I name the energy, not the, it's not even them. It's just this big energy, right? There's this big energy coming up in your body right now. I wonder if jumping on a mini trampoline would help, or bouncing it out or shaking it out, right? Let's let that big energy out so it doesn't take over. The sift technique that I mentioned is just sifting through, right? So I think, my bunnies share my office.
That's all good.
Pretty quiet right now. They're
like, I'm not having it.
I've been in here invading their space ever since this started, and I'm usually so anyways, but sifting through it. So I think validating, yes, it is hard. It does suck. People miss their friends. They're missing that social time. And I think that's why we started some online groups just to give kids skills, but also to have time that they could connect with other kids in a different way, because they miss that. So validating, yes, this is hard. I get that you're frustrated. I get that this isn't fun. They're bored, right? My daughter last night went for food and I heard her twice. She's 17 and she's fabulous. Twice I heard her walk into the kitchen, say, I'm not hungry. I'm just bored. Turn around and walk out. And then later walk in and do the same thing and walk out again. And I thought, and I haven't even told her this yet, but I was so impressed. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. So many of us are doing that right now, right?
Right.
So I think if we notice that, allow it to be there, but sift through it and look at, okay, what sensations are coming up for me right now? What
Noticing.
images go with this? What feelings go with this? What
Mhm.
thoughts go with this? And if we can explore that experience, and again, that's Dan Siegel's stuff,
Mhm.
can really help us reflect on, is this serving me?
Right.
Right? Is this bringing me closer to my intended outcome? If I apply this consequence to this child right now, is it reinforcing what I want to bring about? Right?
Mhm.
If I
Mhm.
respond in an angry way, is it reinforcing the emotional regulation skills I want them to use? So
Right.
there's so many things we can reflect on, but
Right.
that requires that higher order thinking part of our brain to be online. And to
Yeah.
have that, we need to make sure we're doing those, the breathing and the training this part through mindfulness or meditation
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
self-reflection. So it really is critical to build in those self-care pieces however we can,
Right.
even just one thing a day.
Right. And knowing that we have it within us. It's not natural right away. We're gonna get there. It's that, okay, if I'm walking into the kitchen, do I need, yeah, yeah, and we're having that, even if it is that out, that conversation with ourselves, and we're doing it verbally loud, so we can actually hear, like, yeah, I have feelings, sensations, and how do I want to respond to that?
So
Thank
I
you.
was just going to say, even in those situations, I think as parents, when we've taken the situation personally,
Mhm.
which there's going to be many, right? I think it's so important to just go back the next day in a few hours and say, like, look, I probably didn't, do my best um, to handle that situation, or I really took that situation personally.
Mhm.
But I just know that that's that big energy, and having that conversation. So don't be afraid to apologize or to go back. I know sometimes we, just end up feeling so defeated sometimes, right? And they're like, oh gosh, like I messed up again.
Right.
But this is parents. This is what we do.
Right. Right. This
This
is
is
the
We're
what we do.
process.
human,
Yeah.
imperfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mistakes. We all
And
flip
that's
our lid.
great. And I like that, because we want to show our kids, young adults, we're not perfect in fact, and that we make mistakes, and you can come back and change things and edit, and so again, it's also showing that emotional regulation. We're also feeling this and figuring our way through that. We're not perfect, and so that's actually really helpful. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly take a peek. We're going to take a peek at the questions. And I think, both of you really sort of offered us some really nice pieces in terms of how do we really kind of ground ourselves, self-regulate, normalize, and making those distinctions in terms of really connecting with our kids in a much more helpful manner, as much as we can when we start to kind of regulate and calm ourselves into it. Let me see. I think a great question was, when is a healthy screen time? And I think in video games during the pandemic, I think that's been a question that comes up quite a bit. What are your thoughts, either one, in terms of how do we manage that? And we know that, I go back to this very structured schedule we can keep them on, but then not being so lax. So what's the nice possible common ground there? Anyone's thoughts?
I'll just share, and then I'm sure, Marlene, you have lots of thoughts around this. But I think this is so hard right now, like
Mhm.
at this time in particular. So normally we know that for people who flip their lid often, when there's a lack of that emotional regulation, screen time actually increases that, right? It decreases the inhibitory response of the brain. It's, kind of weakening this higher order part. So we want to be really, really mindful about that. But it also right now, and even not in this time, it's how people connect, right? It's how teens and taking that away, by the way, that is their lifeline. So from a parent consequence perspective, we want to be mindful about not doing that whenever possible, because that's their link to other people and normalcy and kind of connection. But I think we want to try to balance the screen time, or at least get in some movement, right? Or break it up so they're not laying on their bed all day, or watching Netflix all day. And
Mm-hmm.
adults too, right? We're all doing this.
Yes.
And it's so easy to do, but it really isn't what our body's wired to move, as one of our therapists always says. So how can we build in the movement? How can we have discussions? How can we make things interactive? Can we use technology to strengthen this part of the brain, like mindfulness, right? And I keep coming back to that, not from mindfulness for me isn't a spiritual practice. It's present moment awareness. And the reality is, as we do mindfulness practices, just being present, noticing our surroundings, training this part of the brain, it becomes stronger so it can talk back to that emotional kind of reactive part. So there are tons of great resources out there too that I think, can we balance in memory games and activities online? Can we balance in, Muse as a brain sensing headband that trains mindfulness? There's lots of stuff out there that enhances attention and focus. And I think if we're weaving some of that in, it may help mitigate.
Right. All of the time. Yes.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think differentiating the screen time between, your free leisure screen time, and when it's, your actual school work time. Because yes, our kids are now like on screens for a very long time. And so, yeah, you definitely want to be a little bit like more lenient, with screen time. I know I personally, typically I wouldn't allow screens for video games and stuff Monday to Friday. But now, after a stressful day of mommy school time, he's allowed a half an hour, 45 minutes. But I love also we've incorporated a lot of, as you said, Lori, like more of the memory games and the puzzles online and stuff. And so sometimes it's just the excitement. They just want to be in front of a screen. And so let's put you in front of the screen and you're going to do like some really fun math questions where you don't even realize that you're doing math. So making it fun as well. But I agree too with having that. Okay, so when are we going to do some physical activity? When are we going to have our family time? Like having all of that scheduled. And again, this being a collaborative effort. So you're not dictating and saying, look, you're going to have 1 hour of screen time. You're going to do this. And then having them ask their opinion. How much screen time do you think, you should have this week or on a daily basis? And what time do you think is best? Knowing the rules are you have to be, not after 9 or 10 or whatever, but allowing them to, pick when do you want it? Do you want 2 half-an-hour chunks? Do you want an hour chunk? For video games and stuff, I also like to have it in more, not in terms of time, but sometimes, what are those games? I don't know, my son doesn't play them, but Fortnite.
Yes. So
like those are like games where you're playing with friends, but it's not necessarily time limited. It's more like a duration of a game. So a game in itself or a session of a game might be 45 minutes. So then you're saying, well, how many games will you play? You can play 2 games. And that's why you're also not going to get the whole blow up when you're saying, okay, I gave you a half an hour and they're in the middle. Like right in the middle of a game with
everyone.
Yeah.
Why do I have to come off, Mom?
Right.
Everyone's on. Yeah.
Right. But if you set those limits of, 2 shows, you get 3 shows and this is it, then that kind of allows them to not want to fight you so much on the screen time.
And it kind of reminds me kind of giving them as much information as possible. Is this...
I just shared, I just thought of this as I was listening to Marlene talk. Dan Siegel has this healthy mind platter. And I think that, this is a great thing to come back to think about, okay, as you said, am I sleeping? Are they sleeping? Are we getting that focused attention time? Are we getting playtime? Are we getting connection? Are we getting downtime where my brain just gets to rest? Coloring is great for that. It allows the amygdala to chill out. It allows our thinking brain to cool down and just be. And then time in together, like I said, is so critical. And of course, the physical activity. So yeah, this is a great reminder.
I like that it has down, because a lot of parents think that video time, the kids playing video Adios is downtime, and it is not downtime.
Nice.
Right? So being able to set those different like downtime activities is really important.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And again, that can be how you schedule, how you're scheduling the day, how you're putting the day together. There's also a question, what is the best emotional style to use? I don't think there's a best emotional style. I think we'd all like to be calm all times, or but what are your thoughts around that? I think that's important, because I think I want people to, leave our conversation today knowing that we don't have a best. We're trying, we're all trying to kind of support one another. But what are your thoughts around that in terms of a best emotional style or use?
Yeah, I think to me, it always comes back to attachment and attunement, right? And again, what's my intended outcome? So again, we do the best that we can with what we know. We're going to make mistakes. That's human. But how can we attune to that child or youth in the moment? Attuning doesn't mean we agree, right? I have a young adult son as well as a teenager. There are going to be lots of times that you don't agree, but it means that you can see and connect with how they're feeling and name it for them, right? Allow it to be there. Hold space for that when they're hurting. And I think that goes a long way. And like Marlene said, owning our own mistakes. So when we mess up, if we want them to be able to do that, we need to demonstrate, that we make mistakes too. If we want them to be empathetic, we need to empathize with them. If we want them to use their voice, we as parents need to listen when they set boundaries with us. And that can be so, so hard because that defensive brain can kick in. But again, if we think of what's the intended outcome, it often, if I think about, well, I want this person to grow into a teenager who uses her voice and sets boundaries, and that's so critical, that we need to make sure we're giving opportunities for them to use their voice and be heard.
Right.
And that's going to foster that confidence.
That's good. And that makes me sort of think about with sometimes with couples, I always say, in terms of when you're in connection with people, tone and facial expression is huge.
So critical.
So just being mindful of that. And it's challenging sometimes, because I wouldn't say for myself, I lose a lot of facial. You know everything that's happening with me, how I feel, everything. And so it's important to recognize that when we're connecting with our kids, same goes as well. What sort of facial expression, what's our tone? And our kids will tell us, "Mommy, you're mad," or "Dad, you're mad," and you're like, "I am," but they're feeling that you're getting in that zone. Is kind of what I kind of tell parents, that you're getting close. And they're aware of that. So I think you're right. There's so many things that we can do to connect and pay attention to the ways that we are connecting with our kids.
And we say, just very quickly, so Marlene can add in, soft eyes, right? Soft mouth, soft voice. So, are your eyes soft? Because our eyes communicate so much more than anything else. What is my mouth doing? Is it smiling? Is it, grimacing? Like, what is it communicating? And then again, that tone of voice, because kids want to be safe. They want to be seen. They want to be secure, right? Those are all things that, regardless of our age, we need.
We need that. Yeah. We had a question. I want to make sure. I'm not sure that it's how do you care for a child with COVID-19 at home? I don't know if there's someone in the home that has, but I would imagine if
that's what I was wondering.
Distancing. I'm not sure what that question is. I'm not sure the details, but I would imagine if you're a single parent, right? If we put everything into context, even as we're talking about today, if we're single parents and we're trying to raise kids on our own, this makes life very challenging. When we're able to kind of say we need a break, sometimes we are using the electronics to kind of give them that downtime. And even as we're here this evening, I just want people to know that there's no shame in that. It's not easy, and so Just in terms of just being really clear, some of the examples that we were talking about tonight, some of it is with parents that are working together that have, but in terms of single parent families, this is challenging. Never mind COVID, but in addition to COVID, it's challenging to do all of this, and just don't do it alone as much as you can. Any supports, resources that you have around you, that you can make use of. And we're going to also share, before we kind of end tonight, some places where you can get access to some resources as well, for regulating and being responsive to yourself. So that's just my thoughts around that. I don't know if you ladies would like to add anything, but that's just something that came to mind when I kind of read that question.
Yeah, I just think this is a time where we need to connect and love more than ever before. And I think even, the parents with the teenager, the young adults, we might think, oh, they don't want to hug me, or they don't want to, but you'd be surprised. You would be surprised. And even those little things like, hey, let's watch a movie together, and you get to pick the movie. Just those little things. It's just an important time that, even if you don't have a good relationship, let's say with your kids right now, and you're not really sure where to start or have that conversation, I just think, or again, if they're sick, or it's just the love and connection, I think is just so needed.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go back to the question about COVID in the home. I'm not sure if that person's still with us or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered about that when I read it too. I thought, well, does it mean that a child has it? Which I'm thinking is probably not the case. Does it mean that somebody else has it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, think of all of our health professionals, right, that are separating themselves from their loved ones because they don't want to bring home that risk. If it is in the home, we have to be, well, in general, we have to be mindful of observing the health practices that are put out there for us, and ensuring that we're trying to prevent the spread. But there are other ways that we can connect. So if somebody's having to isolate because someone in the family has COVID, I think, again, information. Kids need age-appropriate information. I'm doing the best that I can to take care of this right now. I'm home because this is manageable. Most people, and I think this is so critical for people to know, there was a great video by a doctor that I watched yesterday. Most people are not becoming very ill from this, right? Most people are recovering. So, yes, there are fatalities, absolutely, but the rate of fatalities is so much lower. And similar to a flu, there's fatalities with the flu as well, every year. So not to minimize, but we want to make sure that, for a child, if their family member's been diagnosed with this, their mind again is going to be going to that worst case scenario. And we want to reassure as best as possible, not tell lies. We never know what the outcome's going to be, but, I'm doing the best that I can. I'm following all of the recommendations and keeping them updated, right? And connecting as best as they can, I think, is really important.
I think that's nice. It's again, we were talking as we started, flipping the narrative, right? In terms of, right, I like what you're saying, Lori. It's not that we're telling lies, but that people are getting well. People are also getting well from this, and we have to make that, give them a bit more to the story. And if we're not doing it, friends, media, they're all, they will play their role. But it's important to have a full perspective. We're not trying to paint a rosy picture where it's not, but it's important to kind of offer that this is happening as well. This is also something to keep in mind. It's great. And I think just the, one last question, I think we might have touched on it as well too. What tips do we want to give to our teenager to self-regulate? Lori, I think you did, you shared that before, the importance of just kind of allowing them to recognize that boundaries are important. And even, your daughter kind of talking herself through things, feeling herself through what is actually happening. I think it's important that teens also know it's okay to feel. I think that they don't have to be tough. They don't have to keep everything in, and that it's okay. But it also takes the parent to manage that and model that too for them before they actually start to do that as well. I don't know, what are your thoughts in terms of that, Marlene, with teens self-regulating, and especially, yeah, they do want to be independent, and they do want to make their own choices. And I think, Marlene, you shared that as well, the importance of having them have a say.
Mm-hmm.
What else you want to share lastly?
I'm a big fan of journaling, and I know just how important that is. Again, you can't if you don't know what your triggers are, if you don't know what upsets you, if you're not aware of those things, if you're not kind of aware of them on a daily basis, then again, you can't be proactive about them. You're not going to understand the feeling in your body that you feel when you're relaxed, or the feeling of how you feel when you're angry, and you feel like you're going to explode, right? There's those signs that happen before, all that. So just journaling and being aware of, like, making note of, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling at 10 a.m.? How are you feeling at 3 a.m.? After this activity, how did you feel? After that activity, how did you feel? And then again, making a list, of those calming strategies. What is it? I know even for my daughter, I've encouraged her to have like a playlist.
Nice.
And so she has a playlist of really calming, like instrumental, just songs. And then she has like her, bouncing up and down, up reg, I'm through the roof, and I'm gonna rock it out playlist as well. So, but then again, as I said, you don't know that you need them until you're aware of like your body and all that. So just journaling, taking note of that, and realizing where you are. And it's good when other people can help you realize where you're at too, because sometimes you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This week I've been reading quite a bit of The Body Keeps Score, and one of the things is the power in journaling, in writing, and the amount of research that's out there that shares that the difference of just kind of talking about your feelings, but also writing about your feelings and how you're experiencing, how much more healthier, happier, people are able to talk about what they're experiencing. And these are people that are experienced very traumatic experiences in their life. So it's so important, to actually put those words on paper.
And I'll just share one other technique and strategy, if that's okay. I think for teens, it's really important for them to understand the comment said they tend to want to be more independent.
Mm-hmm.
And this is true, right? This is true. That's part of growth and development. That's part of preparing to leave the nest at some point in time. It's healthy. But I think for them to know they don't have to manage this by themselves is important. And I really enjoy the acronym TIP. So TIP looks at temperature. So how can I change temperature right now? So it might be a hot water bottle for grounding and regulating. We had a video clip on this that we released yesterday with a guest speaker, Stephen Terrell, and he was talking about the impact that has on the nervous system. I think it was putting it near the kidneys, maybe.
Right.
I can't remember exactly, but it could be warm temperature, it could be cool, right? Splashing cold water on the face, holding an ice cube. All of this stuff can help us re-regulate. The I stands for intense exercise. So it may be discharging that big energy by shaking it out, stomping it out, going for a run, bouncing on. If you have a trampoline, trampolines are a great way to discharge excess energy. And they're fun and it doesn't seem punishing. Great with kids too. If they're flipping their lid, go bounce and think, because it really helps with the integration. The movement and the thinking helps with, understanding and reflecting. So it could be any kind of intense exercise. Paced breathing. So it could be the ocean breathing. It could be the Sakali breathing. Whatever it is, just trying to go with some kind of fluid paced breath in and out. And then the last P stands for progressive muscle relaxation. So we can tense, right, all of the different parts of our body individually. So, start with the toes, maybe curl them up, then the legs, right, tighten the bum cheeks, like all of it, just make it tight, 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 and release. With kids, I do robot and ragdoll, right? So really stiff and tight like a robot, and we go into a rag doll or spaghetti, right? So there's lots of different adaptations, but teaching them how to tap into their body and shift that affective state, and to know that they don't have to do it alone.
Right. And so I feel like it's getting to know the body again. It's like it's yours. Get to know it. We have lots of time, or hopefully that's changing. But we have the time to get to know it and recognize what we need and what's important to us. So I want to thank you both so much for spending time here with us, and I want to ask both of you first in terms of what are some of the things that you're doing to take care of yourself. Marlene, what are some things that you're doing during COVID to kind of self-regulate, to take care of yourself, that you kind of would want to share with everyone that's been helpful?
So in this time where we've had a lot of time with ourselves, I've been baking. And you know what? I knew I used to bake a long time ago. And then I think it's just the hustle and bustle of things. I was like, it was out the window. I had a really stressful day yesterday. And when my work day was done, I was like, I just want to bake something. And after that, honestly, I just felt amazing. So I don't know if I'm trying to be healthier things. But yes, I've been, and so for me as well, so I'm an introvert at heart, and having everybody home all the time. The first 3 weeks I was becoming very cranky, and I realized it's not just being home that I love, it's being alone and allowing myself to think through my own thoughts, and just having that alone time. And so I'm being more intentional now of scheduling that into my days where, I take a moment by myself so I can regroup and kind of just do something on my own.
Nice. Awesome. Lori, how have you been taking care of yourself?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, I'll tell you, because unlike a lot of people where their schedules have slowed down, ours has really picked up. As the mental health needs are growing, and the therapists that I supervise, there's just more of a need for adapting online. So I think for me, it's been really important. I'm on this computer all day.
Sorry.
9 until 5. I know, and I was about, am I going to do this or not? Because it's part of my self-care. But you know what I did? I started my day at 12 today instead. So, but movement has been so critical. So getting out, going for a run, building in a walk, time in nature, all of those things for me are so, so critical. I know if I'm not outside, I feel sick. I have to build that in. And I know that from traveling and giving trainings too, I will always try to build in some kind of outdoor activity. Vigorous, not vigorous, just movement.
Right.
I love time in with my family. I need that kind of, affection, cuddle time. And, one thing that's come out of this that's been really wonderful is even though it's online, I got away from my small group from church because life just got too busy. My daughter plays sports. And finally now, with everybody at home, we've had the opportunity to reconnect around spirituality. So that's been really nice. I do a meditation every morning, but I often do it. You know how we hit the snooze button?
Yeah.
That's when I do it. And it's it tricks my brain into thinking that it's getting that extra little bit of rest while it's also strengthening my brain at the same time.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
so those are some of my things.
I might steal that from you.
It's awesome. Yeah. And I move between appointments. I get up, I move. I've got little weights. Look at these. When I'm on a conference call and nobody has to see me, I'll actually do weights as I'm.
I love that. Those are so cute too.
Yeah, exactly. They look nice and girly and fun. I love that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
little things, right? Little things.
That's good.
Make a big difference. And gratitude. Sorry, that's the other big one. A gratitude practice. Each day, thinking about what am I grateful for.
Do you tend to do that in the evening, Lori, or throughout the day?
Both, but I think it's so important for the viewers to understand that because the brain is going to worst case scenario,
Mm-hmm.
that actually impacts at a cell biology level, it impacts at a neurological level. Gratitude has the opposite effect. So when we can experience gratitude or joy or happiness,
Mm-hmm.
it actually is immune protective,
Right.
whereas fear, stress, panic is immune suppressive.
Right.
So if you take one thing away, how can you build in some kind of practice?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a YouTube video that talks about like happy starfish
Mm-hmm.
and techniques or gratitude starfish. So there's lots of cool stuff out there.
Awesome. I
Gratitude journaling.
I I think I'm going to take some of those, Lori. And I think I have some information. I want you both to kind of share. Marlene, I know you have something that's coming up, and can you see that? Can everybody see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So Marlene, maybe you can let us know a little bit. First of all, how people can get in contact with you.
Yeah.
And maybe you can also tell us about your event that you're planning.
Yes. Okay. So you can get hold of me on Instagram at cornerstonefs or at marlenespence.com. So on Sunday, this is going to be the 5th week. I've been holding this 90-minute session where I help families kind of put together their family schedule. And so I call it have your schedule ready to go by Monday, because we are going to have it all drafted and ready to go. So I know parents have been feeling a lot of, stress and feeling overwhelmed about, they have their work schedule to balance now with their children at home. Kind of how do they manage that? How do they put it all together? What other things can their kids do to occupy their time and keep them entertained? And so we work together to draft your schedule and have it ready to go for Monday.
Love it, love it, love it. So thank you. And so people can email you to find out more about it.
Yes. Is there a way I can? Oh, okay. No, I can't. Right?
Maybe in the Q&A you can put some information there. Lori, I know you said you have a YouTube channel. Is this it?
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
And so people can also jump on here. I'm seeing that you have mindfulness and meditation for wellness. There's lots going on in here. It's great.
Lots of emotional. So we've really tried with COVID, especially, to get tips and techniques out there that parents, adults, individuals can use for emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
We also have lots of groups that we've been running. So most of them are just at the point of finishing right now, but we did a parent-child attachment enhancing group. So people could come on together, spend time together with some fun exercises. We had a mindfulness series for adults. We had a teen series that just finished, but we are going to run it again. So if people are open to looking at our Facebook page, we always post stuff there, and all of the groups were free of charge. We also offer online therapy. So it's not typically online, but right now we've adapted the model to bring it online, and we have subsidized spaces available. So we are a trauma-specific treatment center, so we're typically working with the bigger, more intensive kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how when we can clear out that stuff that's taking up so much space and energy in our nervous system, the day-to-day stuff feels so much better.
Nice, nice. And Lori, how can people get hold of you?
So Facebook is great. I monitor that. And that's Attachment and Trauma Treatment Center for Healing as well. It's long, but it's up there. Our office manages reception. So our email is reception@ATTCH, so Attachment and Trauma Treatment Center for Healing .org. And our website is the same, www.attch.org. So we have Instagram, Twitter. We're pretty social media hooked up. So I guess.
Great. Well, I want to thank you so much, both of you, for your time and answering and providing some amazing information. And I want to thank everyone who was able to stick around for as long as you have. And I definitely feel that everyone has provided some good information, some good starts. If there's anything else either one of you would like to add, definitely feel free. If there's anything you wanted to share beforehand.
I just want to thank you for having me. I feel really honored to be here. I've enjoyed hearing from both of you. Marlene, you had some great tips, and Carole, I know you just interjected here and there, but I can tell you've got so much wisdom to share as well. So this is a beautiful idea, and I'm glad to participate.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I would have to echo exactly what Lori said. It was great. Thank you, Carole, for just again facilitating this discussion. It's so needed right now.
Yeah, I know everyone's busy, so I really appreciate when I say I know you're taking time out of your schedule and making your evening longer. I really appreciate that. So thank you so much, and have a great evening, and take good care.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.